Okay, so I get an email today from Mr. Donnell Alexander, and I've been fortunate to be able to correspond with him, and we've traded a couple of emails, and he has sent me a very reasonable and fair question. Hey man, I started writing and began to wonder. I've been looking at the first line of this email for like 15 minutes. I so badly want to read it like Samuel L. Jackson might read it, but I don't dare. Um, hey man, I started writing and began to wonder. Can you point me to something on the web that can help me identify you as an actual person? A good question, a fair question, one that I do not have a good answer to. Um, I don't do the Twitter, don't do the Tumblr, the Facebook, um, all those social media kinds of things. They don't suit my purposes. For me, most of those things are time suck, and there's no value to me in spending time with that kind of thing. And so no, I really don't have a web presence. And my work is all freelance research, freelance ghostwriting. It's all NDA. Uh, People that can't do the work, or people that won't do the work, uh, or people that have the authority to outsource it and expense it. Uh, but it's all NDA, which I take very, very seriously. And it's a problem. It's a problem in exactly situations like this where I need credentials to approach somebody. I don't really have them, at least not in a way that I can use them publicly. So that's a no. The answer to your question is no. On the internet, I can't really point you to something. Um, so I thought I'd make this video and try to cover at least some of the basis in what's behind the question, that I'm serious in what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about, that the project I'm talking about is something I am in fact truly working on. Uh, so I've got here a very hard to find copy of Ghetto Celebrity. So one of the things that had me trying to find a contact for Donnell Alexander. Um, Having a very hard time finding the book at all in any kind of decent condition. And for what I'm doing, I really needed at least one signed copy. And in fact, I did come up with two signed copies, one of which is not here yet, and it's running late. I'm getting a little bit concerned about whether that was a smart buy or not. This one is flat signed and dated. It's actually in pretty good. It's actually in pretty good condition. So this is dated July 3 of 2003. So contemporary to publication, which is very nice. The book that I'm waiting on, which I hope works out, is not dated, but it is inscribed. So that will be nice. I also have a copy slightly nicer than this one. It's got a little bit better dust jacket on it. I would still not rate it higher than kind of a VG minus. There's a little bit of wear. There's a little bit of wear here. So I have an unsigned copy that's a little nicer than the signed copy. The project that I'm working on is based off of McSweeney's Books Sampler Number 1. The very first catalog McSweeney's put out. And at the very top entry, we have Donnell Alexander, Ghetto Celebrity, which in the course of my research and learning about these books and picking up copies of these books and hunting down some nice signed copies, come to find it was so close to publication, it was in the catalog, slotted to be one of the very first books put out by McSweeney's. Never happened. Went to Crown in 2003, which begs quite a few questions. And to thoroughly research this catalog and be able to discuss each of these titles intelligently, the fact that this title was not published by McSweeney's does not make it any less important to documenting this catalog. Therefore, this book is still important to me as part of the project. Also important to me is what happened to the ISBN. And it was in fact reassigned to the Quarterly Concern, issue number 7 of the Quarterly Concern. And while I've been focusing on the first catalog, the very earliest standalone titles, at a time when McSweeney's, all they had was a Quarterly Concern. That was the whole press. You know, whether they were going to get from issue to issue was probably in question. So this would have been a big step up for them to print these first books. I am also very fortunate to have a catalog for late 2004, early 2005. I am extremely interested in this early ephemera, these early catalogs, because they help tremendously with the documentation and the chronology. The first catalog is actually not tremendously hard to find, but that's because it's the first one. This is the only copy I have seen of this catalog, and I have not had a single opportunity to get at any other catalog because they're not the first and nobody cares about them. They're really not worth any money. Now, even the first one's not worth all that much money. I know they're out there. Booksellers and bibliophiles are notorious pack rats. I know there are booksellers out there with a box of 20 years worth of McSweeney's catalogs and would probably be happy to sell me the entire box for not a lot of money, especially if they see that I'm serious and I want to put them to real use. But finding that guy and finding that box, I must not be as good at research as I like to think, because it's not going very well. So that's some of the documentation that I can provide that I am an actual person. I will link also to a video that I made for my mother. I made a video about the first catalog. My mother's 75 years old, and one of the things I do is pretty regularly I will send her a webcam video about different things I'm working on, and I sent her a video just kind of ticking down the titles of this catalog and talking just a little bit about each one. It's about a half an hour video. Terminally boring to anyone except me and my mother, but that's all that video is intended to be. but I'll provide a link to it. As far as documenting it, I'm an actual person. Really, the best way I can do that, other than referring you to booksellers who will vouch that I am a buyer specifically of McSweeney's, and most specifically of early McSweeney's titles, and desperately seeking early McSweeney's ephemera, as in catalogs, are some of the titles with the first catalog. The Neil Pollock Anthology of American Literature. The very first standalone book published by McSweeney's. Surprisingly inexpensive. I would expect there are more McSweeney's collectors than there are, and I would expect them to be a little more serious about the early McSweeney's books. But quite a few of them are really underpriced in my opinion. This one I was very fortunate. I got a signed copy, but it's got a great inscription. Ed, it is the beating of my hideous heart. Ed, it is the beating of my hideous heart. That's a nice inscription. I don't know the context of it, but I really do like it and feel fortunate to have it. The next book they published was The Shape We're In by Lethem, also signed. One of those people that takes the entire page to sign his name. I mean, I thought Dave Eggers had a crazy big signature these days, but even Lethem's got him beat. The next book they published, Amy Fusselman's The Pharmacist's Mate. And this is interesting because she did a sequel to this book, essentially a sequel to this book, with another press several years later, called 8, a memoir. So that title I consider important to this title. I particularly consider it important to this title because McSweeney's has subsequently issued The Pharmacist's Mate and 8, with both books in one volume. So this was the third book that McSweeney's published. She followed up with a sequel with another publisher a few years later, and now it's come back around to McSweeney's with the bundle of The Pharmacist's Mate and 8 in one book. And so for that reason, I think having all of those titles is essential to having the full story of this catalog. And I could go on, and I'll go on to one more because it's one that I'm not particularly happy about. Lydia Davis. Samuel Johnson is indignant. 2 states, the first printing. The first state, first printing, has a maroon border around the cover. The maroon carries through to the spine, and it carries through to the back cover, the back jacket. The second state, first printing, they changed the jacket. It has a white border around the front cover instead of maroon. Comes across the spine in blue, It picks up again in white on the back jacket. But the blurbs have changed. When they change the jacket, they change the blurbs. Some of them are identical. Some of them are the same. Some of them are not. So very interesting first and second state first printings on this book. I don't know if she is reclusive or what the situation is, but signed copies of this book in good condition are obscenely expensive. Really outrageously expensive. I had to pop for 2 of them. I needed both variants. The way I'm doing this collection, I'm doing all signed copies in fine condition. So I needed the first state and the second state, and I needed them both signed, and it's a book that's very, very hard to find a nice copy of signed. And I have entirely too much money in those books, but it's not a title that you can sit around and look to find a value buy on. If you find a nice copy for sale and you want it, you better buy it, because then it could be a long time before you find another nice one. So that's some of the notes on establishing I'm serious about this first catalog and I know what I'm talking about. Though I am an actual person, I can't help you with the web. It's just not part of my personal life to have a presence on the web, and it's not a part of my professional life to have a presence. Definitely not a part of my professional life to have a presence on the web, because I'm a ghostwriter. My name never appears. I'm never associated with my work. I would love to write my own things. Love to have my own name on something, and it would certainly help me when I'm doing research. It would help me with my credibility to be able to say, be able to point to some professional credentials. But there are ways around that, and if I need to learn something, I'm gonna find the answer one way or the other. So I'm almost 20 minutes into am I an actual person, and I'm not sure that I've adequately answered the question. But I will respond to the email as best I can. I'm happy to add any documentation that might be required, or provide references to booksellers who are familiar with my interest in McSweeney's. But I'm very serious about what I'm doing. I want the stories behind these books. I want the stories behind the people, how these books happened. I need to add some life to the grouping. Been very satisfying learning the factual details. Been very satisfying to acquire the grouping. It makes quite a nice display to have this pathetic little catalog as the centerpiece with these really nice books around it. That's pretty cool. But I need more text than just the bibliographical facts. I need the stories behind the books to really bring this display to really give it the color that it needs to be interesting to people beyond me. So there you go. That's I don't think this counts as a web presence when I put it up on YouTube, but there you go.